Welcome to another episode of the Hustle Harder Show. I'm James Gaskin, and sitting with me today is my guest, Josh Swart. Super excited. We're sitting here in Josh's studio here in his office in Concord, North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte. Yeah, woohoo. Super happy to be here. Really appreciate you taking the time. We just recorded an episode for your show, which is, what is your show called?
Built for Wealth podcast.
Built for Wealth podcast. So check that out. YouTube, all the
Spotify,
all the places,
everywhere.
So Built for Wealth podcast with Josh Swart, really good stuff. And it was really awesome kind of being on your show and going through that. But thank you for sitting down for a little bit longer and
of course
entertaining me.
Yeah.
So, I'll kick it over to you for kind of a self intro, and then we can kind of get into your story and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah. Josh Swart. I've been investing, started in 2017. And through a long, hard journey, getting to the point now where we're fortunate enough to be able to invest and build houses, rent houses, help homeowners be relieved of their stressful housing situations. And I get to do it with some really cool people.
Awesome. What's the state of your business right now? How many units are you putting on the ground on an annual basis today?
In a typical year right now, we're probably about 70 units a year. That building, remodeling, vast majority of that are new builds. So whether it's built to sell or built to rent, we're just whatever pencils out, we do it.
I love it. And then we were talking earlier. You sell a portion of those, and then some of those you actually keep for your own rental portfolio, right?
Yeah. Right now, with how hard it is to find good rental deals, we identified that some of the housing products that we were building, as long as we can get it for a good price on the lot, on the entry, and most typically it's lots where we buy a lot that's a little bit bigger, we subdivide it into townhome lots, we can get those to pencil out to be good rental properties. So we go into it with a lot of equity, and it's a brand new house. So there's warranties, 10-year structural warranty. We got a 1-year warranty on all the mechanicals, 2-year builder warranty, and it's brand new. You're not dealing with all the old headaches that old houses carry over. And yeah, so it's something that we can get into it. The rent rates are right around that 1% mark of what we're building it at. And then we can refinance, pull most of our money out. And it's just a little bit more of a desirable product for our investment strategy right now.
That's awesome. And I love that you keep some, right? I mean, I think in terms of building long-term wealth, having a component of that, going into your own portfolio is really, really helpful. And you've been able to structure your business in a way that allows for that, which is amazing. I'm always interested, like, how did you get started in this? Like, what's the thing about real estate? How did you get introduced to it? And then what was the thing about it that kind of made you decide, like, hey, this is what I want to spend my time, doing?
I was fortunate enough to actually work for a couple investors when I was a teenager. And I was the laborer, just doing all the dirty grunt work, demos, whatever it was. And I would follow around the guy that I worked for, and he was just an open book. He told me about all this stuff. And so for me, my path in life, I was going down the road of joining the fire department, going to the fire academy. And so that's what I wanted to do, right? But real estate was always really intriguing to me. And the thought of flipping a house and remodeling it, just because that's something that I was familiar with from the construction side. But it wasn't until I eventually did get a job with the fire department. So I'd be working a 24-hour shift. I'd come home and go work construction, go back, work a 24-hour shift, come home, work another full day construction. And I was just working like constantly, like nonstop. And that was the time where I felt like life was passing me by, and started to ask questions and read books and try to find out, hey, I think I'm on the wrong side of the equation here. And so that started me on that journey of just discovering what it looks like to be the one who's writing the checks and not getting a paycheck. So
that's a big transition though, right? Because I mean, you go from kind of being an employee and earning an hourly or however your comp structure was set up, to like actually having your name on the loan and,
Yeah.
the financial obligation. How did you cross that bridge?
Golly. You have to have some level of risk tolerance to do it and belief in yourself to be able to do it. I wasn't handed a pile of money. I had to work with family and friends to raise money to try to scrape it together to do my first deal. And fortunately, it was something that worked out. We made $1,000 when it was all said and done. but that transition from for the lifetime of me, my adult life, working, receiving a paycheck, and being reliant on that to switching to being totally on my own, that was a very hard transition. There's a lot of ups and downs, but the upside has been substantially higher doing that than it was ever to be, my career path could have provided me. I remember when we moved to Charlotte, I remember specifically one time I was going through the hiring process at the Charlotte Fire Department, and I was getting towards the end in the process, and I had one of their captains was like, this is the best job in the world. There's not too many jobs out there where you can top out in 5 years making $80,000 a year. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm worth more than that. And so I dropped out of that hiring process. And that was like a really key moment for me too, of, starting to feel that discomfort and being like, I don't think this entrepreneurial thing is working out for me. I'm going to go back into the fire department. That was a key moment for me of just being like, no, I'm worth more than that. I believe in myself enough to pursue this. And it paid out in the end.
I mean, you got to jump in with both feet, right? Was there ever a time after that? Because it sounds like that was a big inflection point. You were kind of, maybe straddling the line a little bit. After that, was there ever a time where you're like, ooh, I don't know, maybe this isn't for me?
Oh man, it's all the time.
Yeah.
The wild thing about this journey of starting a business, running a business, is you think the initial carrot that draws you to it is freedom, it's finances, it's creating a better life for yourself. But what you don't realize is the person you need to become in order to be able to have the responsibility and the capacity to be able to handle all of that stuff. And that is the unforeseen thing that you don't see. And so if you're not willing to embrace that, we'll call it sanctification of being a business owner, and realizing that the fun thing that was the carrot of getting into this, like why you started real estate. Like, I love hunting deals. I love finding deals. There's a certain point where you start graduating into, okay, well then it's not just grinding and hunting and finding deals. Now it's, building a team, managing people, all of these other components. There's at every step of that graduation, you're being stretched. And at every stretching point, I've been like, I'm done with this. This is the worst. But, they're all good things. And what the byproduct of that is, maturity and growth as a person. And it's providing you an opportunity to become, better and to grow in areas that you aren't strong in, so. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and I think taking on the responsibility of a team, right, is a big burden. That's emotionally and then of course time and management and the financial aspect, but that's a big thing. How big is your team today?
There are, including our virtual employees, there's 10 of us.
Okay. And how many virtual employees? Yeah.
Just 2.
Okay. What do you have the virtual people doing?
Bookkeeping, and then one's like a VA admin, miscellaneous tasks, scrubbing lists, all sorts of random stuff.
Yeah, the virtual assistant sort of thing is fascinating to me. There's so many things you can do, and of course now we have AI as a whole thing now, where there are certain things that you can have AI do. But what a great way to add leverage to your business.
Oh yeah,
at a pretty low cost basis. That's really cool. So talk to me about the journey. So like you did your first deal in 2017, right? And then how many deals did you do that first year? Just the one? Just the one. Okay. It
was a live and flip.
Okay.
Yep.
So you actually lived in it?
We lived in it.
Okay. While you were working on it?
Yeah. It's just so fun.
I love that. So I did the first episode I recorded for this show, I did with Jeff Neidigger, who you know.
Yeah.
Jeff's out of Chicago, and his, if you haven't listened to that episode, you should check it out. But his story, and you've heard his story, I'm sure before, but he talks about his first deal. He was literally sleeping on the floor of the house while he was renovating it on an air mattress, and the air mattress kept getting snagged on a loose nail. And so he would just, every night he would wake up on the floor with a deflated air mattress. But I think those stories are really amazing because it really it humanizes what you've done. Because I mean, 70 deals a year, especially doing the ground up stuff that you're doing, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff that you're, and a lot of people would look at you and see somebody who's been extremely successful. But, kind of that origin story is very relatable. A lot of people kind of think about this and never take the jump or never make the, go all in. But you did that, right? And you, in what is it, 8 years or so since you started, now doing 70 a year. How did that progression work? How many deals did you do in year 2?
Year 2, I think it was 2.
Okay.
It wasn't, 2018 was only 2, but then 2019 is when things really started to expand rapidly. But I remember that first deal that I did, I'd done dozens and dozens of remodels. I worked on a lot of homes. Like, I knew what I was doing, but when it was my house and it was my finances on the line, I remember like vividly, like my father-in-law and a couple other people came over to help, do demo, and like everybody's got hammers and stuff. And I started smashing open that first wall, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I got really hot and like my face was flushed. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm tearing apart this house. I have no idea what I'm doing, but there's like those moments of self-doubt that kick in. And at the time I was working at a gym, and my schedule was 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. I was the facilities manager, and I was doing what I could to get by. And I swiped this bag of, like, you would have these supplement companies that would come by and offer samples. And they don't know this, but it was like this bag of probably like 100 pre-workout samples. And I swiped the bag. I was like, I'm going to use all these. And I had it in the center console of my truck. And every day when I was finished at 3, I'd be driving and I'd take a pre-workout on my way. And by the time I got to the house, my face was tingling and my hands were tingling and I was like ready to go, But yeah, that was that first one. And it turned out to be great in the end. We lived in it for 3 years. 2 of my 4 kids were born in that house. A lot of great memories tied up there. But that really was the catalyst to building the confidence to start doing more on my own. So, and then in the next year after that, I bought my first rental, did my first flip. And then after that, it was, things kind of snowballed from there.
That's awesome. Was there a catalyst in 2019, or was it just that you were ready? Like, you kind of got the confidence aspect up so you could start going harder and taking on more risk or what have you? Or was there something market related that also contributed?
2019 was, I bought this property that I ended up subdividing. And that was the first time that I started building. And so there was a guy that I knew from the gym that I was at who's doing new construction. And that first rental that I bought, it was on a large lot. And I remember standing out on the street thinking, man, this is like a really big property. I wonder if, I could subdivide this and sell it off or whatever. So I reached out to him. I was like, hey, I've got this property I'm buying. It was like $50,000 for this house. And he's like, yeah, you can subdivide it. I'll do the surveys. I'll pay you $7,000 for it. And, I'm like, great. That's $7,000 that I didn't have before that we just found. And so that was 2018. And then in 2019, I found this property that was, again, another large lot. And then looking at it, I was like, I think we can subdivide this into 3. And so I told him, I was like, hey, if I sell you this lot for, a fair price, will you teach me how to do this and allow me to build on this other one? So I remodeled the house, sold him one lot. He built on that. And then he taught me and walked me through that process. And that was in 2019. And that deal was the catalyst for me, because that was the first time we did a deal. We made over $100,000 on it when it was all said and done. And I was like, that's where it's at right there. And prior to that, it was like a flip that we made $1,000 on, a failed flip that turned into a rental. It was like maybe we made 10, 15, 20 grand on a flip, But that opened my eyes to see what was out there and what was possible. And so ever since that point, it's been, how can I identify and find as many properties like that as possible? And then, there's been some other things that have come across over the years that have been distractions and
Sure.
ups and downs, but that was the catalyst.
That is a great story, because I think there's a couple of things there, right? One is you found a business model, right? You found all right, well, if I can find properties that are oversized for one dwelling unit and I can subdivide, that creates a tremendous amount of opportunity to go ahead and build and add additional units without having to go find more properties, right? And then you kind of figured, all right, light bulb moment. All right, here we go. And then you built kind of a buy box basically that accommodated that strategy, and you've taken that a long way. And so it's really, really cool. And I think, we see that a lot with our most experienced and most successful clients, is that they have like a kind of a defined strategy. Now they may dabble in other things, right? Real estate investors and entrepreneurs as a whole tend to be, not necessarily risk averse and willing to try things, right? And a lot of that comes from the self-confidence that you build as an entrepreneur. But, finding a formula and then just getting really great at replicating that formula, it keeps you out of trouble because you kind of start building a process that's very repeatable. Yeah. And it sounds like you've been able to do that, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many deals that we've done where it's listed on the market, or a wholesaler sends it to us, or we just stumble across it, or we just call the homeowner. And because nobody sees the fact that there's all this extra land and we're looking at it differently, we're able to create deals where nobody else could, or they didn't see the value. And it's been something that's really allowed us to grow. And yeah, it's been great.
Now, talk to me about the markets that you work in. So we're in Concord right now, which is where you live. Is this the main focus of your investment activity, or does it expand into Charlotte, or, what does the geography look like for you?
Our primary focus is the secondary markets all around Charlotte. I don't even think we have one deal right now in Charlotte, and we've got, 160 units or so on our books right now that we're in production on. And only one of those is actually in the city of Charlotte. The rest of them, it's all these metro cities. So where we live, the county where we live, and then every surrounding county around the Charlotte metro is where we're focused on.
And that probably is some of the reason for that focus, because in some of the outer lying areas, there's more land or larger lots, like a predominant.
Yeah, there's more availability of land.
Yeah.
Some of them are older markets, some of them are newer markets that are expanding, but the price points are also in that affordability index. And so we market to people off market. And so a lot of the sellers that we talk to, very commonly it's, hey, things are too crowded, things are too saturated, we want to move out. And so we are building in those out areas and providing housing product in those areas.
Got it. And I bet, my assumption is, because, the direct to seller marketing is definitely not a novel concept. A lot of people do that. I would imagine there's a lot more competition for those properties when you're in a major metro. A lot more people are making those same phone calls. I would assume that there's not nearly as much competition in some of these outlying areas. Have you found that, or do you still find it to be pretty competitive?
It's pretty competitive. I don't think there's any market that we're in where we're the only people or one of few there doing it. Success leaves clues. And so it's very quick. If we were to go into a market, there's other people that would be there as well. Or, it's very rare for us to go into a market and us do that, or at least building houses without seeing some comps that support, the viability of building and the price points and stuff. So we kind of stick to these areas where there is at least, other investors operating as well.
Yeah. But you've got some competitive advantages, I would think, right? And how long have you lived in this area?
Since 2017.
So, okay, you moved here in 17 because you're from California, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What part of California are you from?
Sacramento.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You operate in a variety of different counties. I would assume all those counties go about the process of like entitlements and permits and things slightly differently. Have you had any experiences where you've gone into a new county, a new market, and then been a little surprised by the differences? Let's hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is a real thing. The permitting process, the planning process, the approval process, you may be able to throw up a house in 90 days. But the process to get it to that point where you have approved permits of an approved subdivided lot, I mean, that could be 6-9 months in some areas. And there's some areas that are faster. Typically what we see is you have these outlying cities where the rules are less strict. So a bunch of builders, they go in there, they subdivide a bunch of properties, they build, things get thrown up, and all of a sudden they're like, hold on, put the brakes on. And then they start implementing more roadblocks or red tape and being able to do that. There's one city that we've been building in for a while where their planning department is a joke. I mean, we've had one plan go through 3 different reviewers. It's been through the review process. It's been approved, and then it's been kicked back out, and then it's back into. I mean, it's a nightmare. So as best you can, you try to identify these counties or these cities that are easier to work with. But in order to build at scale, you can't be selective on just one or two. You know, there are some now where we're just like, I will not do that anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, may just be looking at price, but then when you look at the acquisition of the land, the cost of that, the timeline to get approval, maybe that extra 3 or 4 months in that approval process, or even the inspection period. How long does it take for their inspectors to get out there? There's some counties or cities that we work in, it takes them a week just to get out. And then there's some that's the same day, some next day. But if you think at every single time one of your trades has to be inspected, the foundation, the plumbing, the mechanicals, like the framing, whatever it is, and every time you call an inspection, it takes a week for them to get out there, that could add 2 to 3 months to your process when it's all said and done. You know, heaven forbid you have a reinspection. And I know I'm blabbing on about this, but those are real things that play into our decision process and where we're going to build.
That's all what this is about, right? I mean, it's really just learning kind of from your learnings, right? And how you've grown. But it's not always straightforward, right? And I know I've interviewed Jim Allen, who's a big realtor and a land developer in Raleigh. And, you know, he was talking about how to get permits for a new build in Raleigh can take 18 months. I mean, that's insane, right? And Raleigh is a very fast growing market. So I don't know if some of that is intentional to slow some of that growth down or what their deal is, but it can be that drastic where, you know, you could go one city or one county over and the process could go from, you know, 2 or 3 months to a year or two. And that if you don't know what you're getting into, I think you can be surprised and not in a good way. So it's interesting. It kind of, you know, obviously these are not major markets, right? Charlotte would be considered a major metro. These are going to be kind of secondary markets. So it makes sense that in order to do your volume, you really have to kind of spread out a little bit. But understanding and having some focus, I think, is important. And it seems like you've kind of maintained that focus in this region, which I think gives you a lot of advantages. What is the next step for your business? I mean, you know, you're doing a lot of units, right? You're building a team. Like, where do you want to take this? What's the ultimate goal for you?
I think the ultimate goal from the beginning has been the passive income. And for a while, I was buying rentals, and I could probably make the argument that buying rentals held back my business from growing in the beginning, where I was really stoked about, hey, I bought this, I refinanced, I have a ton of equity in it. And like, that's cool on paper, but you can't eat equity. You can't leverage that equity in a rental. It's very hard to, in being able to help fuel your business growth. So yeah, right now, I really enjoy the build to rent product. That's something that we're really passionate about. It's working for us right now, and the market may change. And that may no longer be the case. I can tell you where our pricing is getting compressed with, taxes and insurance and interest rates right now. It's making harder. It's really hard for us to make deals pencil. But that's one way that we're able to make it work. But yeah, continuing to build at scale and continue to grow that. Our company is continuing to grow. So that's always fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, our focus now is building a brand as being one of the most trusted home buyers locally, and just going really deep in our market.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I mean, we talk to a lot of the same people, and I definitely hear a lot of people talking about trying to get into new asset classes, trying to get into new markets, and there's definitely a time and a place for doing those things. But I do think that there's often a lot more opportunity underneath your feet than you realize. And I think it's just some people, it can be the easy way, right? Like, oh, I need more deals, I'm just going to go, instead of like doing the work to find the deals where you're at. That can be, I think, a miscalculation that some people make, that more territory, a larger footprint is equivalent to a bigger business, and that's not always the case. Exactly. But it sounds like you've kind of figured it out by feeling your way through it, which is really good.
I think there's something to be said about having intimate knowledge with your local market and identifying if something comes across where you're like, hey, this is a really good deal. And it may not be because it's a black and white thing, but you may have an understanding of this is coming down the road here, and therefore this is going to be good. This is in path of progress, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Some of those things carry huge weight in why we're just wanting to go deep in our market versus just expanding and growing.
Yeah. And that's one of the kind of major tenets of our business, right? On the lending side, is that we seek out investors like you who have done that work and really understand their market at a really intimate level. Because at the end of the day, like, underwriting or understanding a particular house in a particular market, it's not rocket science, right? Like, there's definitely some squishy variables you have to kind of get comfortable with, but it's not that difficult to understand. All right, well, they bought it for this, and they're going to put this much in it, and here's what they're going to sell it for, and the comps support it. But I think what we find is the best investors that really understand their market, they will find opportunities that other people miss. And so, finding those people for us, and then just trying to provide them with as many resources as possible to do those deals. Like, it's a much better bet than trying to go and find 100 people that are doing a couple deals a year. Yeah. We would much rather work with somebody that's doing volume, has a system, has a process, and a business model, and then just fueling that business model. Oh, yeah. I think that's and I think that's why, we've really enjoyed the opportunity to work with you, because you've done that, and you've built the experience over a few years to be able to really support that with a track record, which is great. I'm curious, like, you've built a team. How long did you wait till you started hiring and really establishing a team versus just kind of yourself and friends and family?
I think it was 2021 when I made my first hire. And when you start investing, and the more you do it, and your desire to continue to produce and grow and buy more property and all this, you start to identify areas where, well, one, you establish, okay, I'm the acquisition agent, I'm the lead manager, I'm the marketing guy, I'm the finance guy, I'm the capital raiser, I'm the dispositionist guy. You're holding every single seat possible. And for me, it was just, I started identifying areas where things were falling apart, like, I haven't looked at my QuickBooks in 6 months, or like, whatever the issue was. And so it was more out of necessity of like, hey, if I hire somebody to just cold call for me or manage my texting campaign or whatever it was, how much more capacity would that open up for me to be able to, raise capital or whatever I needed at the time. And so that's what was the impetus of me making my first hire. And so that was towards the beginning of 2021. And then, slowly from there, it's identifying more areas where it's, hey, I really like this aspect of this business. I don't like this part. And this is the part that I need to delegate to somebody else. And so things become more segmented. And then you're hiring people for area of expertise. And then it's, hey, this person has an experience in project management. This person has experience in sales. And then it starts to grow to be more like expertise knowledge in your hires. So that's kind of that growth process over time.
I think that's really interesting because, I think one of the things that investors that are, earlier in their journey, let's say, that they really struggle with is letting go of some of those details, right? And also the added responsibility of bringing on a team that now relies on you and increases your overhead. So now you need to do more deals, right? It kind of forces growth on you in some ways, or it can feel that way. How did you deal with that mental aspect of like kind of finding some things to let go and then, well, let's start there and then I'll ask a follow-up.
That's hard. Releasing control, for sure. Because I am highly independent, highly driven. And if it's not being done, and if it's not being done on my timeline, I'll tend to step in and just do it myself. And so allowing somebody else to fail is really hard.
Yeah.
Especially when it's on my dime, but if you don't allow people that opportunity to fail, like give them that freedom to be able to go down that path on their own with guidance, they're never going to build the confidence to be able to do it on their own. There's probably times where, my project manager, when he was starting, overpaid on certain things, right? But it's just exercising that muscle and giving him the confidence to be able to make decisions on his own and better decisions in the future. And you just can't micromanage every aspect of the business. I would much rather have somebody who's managing one component of the company and doing it to the best of their ability. And they may not be able to do it as good as me, but more often than not, they're doing it better than I ever could. I'd much rather have that person doing that than me to think ignorantly that I can do it all myself and I'm missing the ball and dropping the ball all over the place. So
it takes a certain amount of maturity to sort of admit that, like, hey, I'm not going to be the best at everything. But it's also a necessary element of scale, right? If your goal is to build scale, like it's almost impossible, especially in a business like this where there are so many details, right? So many timelines, and it's just hard to keep all that stuff straight in your head. I would be terrible at it personally.
Oh yeah, I mean, I thought I'm competitive, and I'm like, I'm so good. I'm like the best at this, best at that. Like just thinking ignorantly, right? And then you hire people and you bring them in. They're like, oh wow, they're really good. They're way better they're way better at talking to people on the phone than I am, or way better at managing contractors than I am, or way better at managing details than I am. We had this funny moment last week or 2 weeks ago where we were all sitting at our conference table at the Monday morning staff meeting, and we started talking about degrees at some point. And I was like, wait, what's your degree? You have a degree? Like all these people. And I was like, raise your hand if you have a degree. And everybody at the table raised their hand. And I was the only person who didn't. I was like, I'm the dumbest person in the room now, And so I feel like there's been this like slow switch between hiring people and bringing people on board that they're either subject matter experts or they're really good at their craft. And it's allowed me to do what I need to do to keep driving things forward and make messes over here and help, clean things up where needed. But yeah, it's definitely a shift.
Yeah. Did you have, well, I guess first question, do you have any coaches or mentors that you work with today?
Yeah, that's been something that I've really valued over the years. And so off and on, I've had, one-on-one coaches or mentors or people holding me accountable. And yeah, I mean, to be able to, it's rare to find people who are entrepreneurial business owners who've done it successfully. And when I found people like that, I just want to like cling to them. And because there's struggles, or there's things that I'm dealing with that not many people can relate to. And the hard thing is if I do try to find in my friend circle or whatever, I'm trying to relate to them with dealing with some of my problems, it may come across as bragging, you know, like I have this massive credit card bill that I need to pay off, or I have this, or I have this. And, finding people that you can relate with, it's rare. And so, having, business mentors has been a huge thing for me. In addition to that, finding other entrepreneurs and like masterminds, like Collective Genius has been huge for me, just to find people that I can sympathize with and who understand, they get it. They know the ups and downs, the challenges of being a business owner, and especially in the real estate space where you do have control, but the market is really in control of how things go. And so, yeah, that's been a huge part of
it's the illusion of control.
The illusion of control.
Did you have any coaches or mentors that helped you through that process of like starting to let go of certain parts of your business and build a team? Was that encouraged from that aspect, or is that something that you kind of took on your own?
Yeah, the first coach that I had was like a MAPS coach. I think it was one of those Keller Williams business coaches. And we would meet weekly, and every week I would have this like to-do list of stuff. It was like I was getting homework. Like, I am an adult. I have children and I have homework every week for my business coach. But there was this stretch where it was like a couple weeks in a row, and it was out of necessity, because at some point she's like, I need you to do this. And if it's not, there's going to be a painful consequence. And she asked me, she's like, what do you want it to be? I was like, you're going to have to make me donate to like the Hillary Clinton Foundation or something as like punishment if I don't get this stuff done. And, fortunately I never had to do that. But that was other areas where I was identifying, like there are places in my business that I'm dropping the ball at. And if I want to continue to grow and continue to do what I'm doing, I have to bring people in to help do that.
That hits on an interesting aspect of you. And I think like the combination of confidence that you have to take something like this on and really, go all in both, with both feet, but also the humility to admit that you don't know everything or that you're not going to be the best at everything. Like those are two sort of conflicting ideas. And, sounds like you've been able to balance those, because you've got to have the confidence and the self-belief, but you also have to be willing to kind of be honest about like, all right, I'm actually not getting this part done very well, and maybe it's time to bring somebody in.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, those honest conversations you have with yourself are just, they're not fun sometimes, but it's an easy fix.
Yeah. Well, and not to belabor the team point, but I do think that a lot of people who are trying to grow one of these businesses and who aspire to kind of be where you are today, I think that a lot of people, like, they might recognize that they need to add to their team or build a team. But I think a lot of people have a really hard time figuring out the best way to do that. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean you necessarily are great at spotting that in somebody else either. And then there's the whole culture aspect and how that all comes together. So how did you navigate that part of it? Because I feel like a lot of people get lost in that, and they making a bad hire is very painful, right? Just with all the time and energy that goes into training, and then somebody doesn't work out. And it can be a very iterative process. And if you don't get it right quickly or relatively quickly, man, it can be tough. So how did you get through that aspect?
I think it was after the second person that I had to let go that I went to this journey of discovering there's got to be a better way to do this. And so naturally going to the Collective Genius, there's a lot of guys that use software, personality testing softwares like the Predictive Index as a way to weed people out. And that one tool has been extremely helpful for me in identifying, does somebody, his personality type, character traits match the type of work that they're doing? And then in addition to that, we do the cognitive testing to see, how do you process information? Like, can you process complex information quickly? Like, we're in a very fast-paced business. We got to make decisions that have large financial implications. And so we need people who are able to process things quickly. But before, it was, I have a need, you're cool. I think we can make this work. You're hired. And there was no system behind it. But now there's some checks and balances to where, hey, honestly, anybody can apply for a job. They can put on a good face for a month or two, and then they just drop off right after that. And we're trying to weed out that from happening. And one of the best ways is matching somebody's personality type to the type of position that they're going to be in. Are you highly social, highly collaborative? You're not going to do great in a corner cubicle crunching numbers all day.
Right. That's not your CFO or your controller.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not a life-giving position for you. But that person who's highly collaborative, very sociable, loves talking is probably really great on the phone, And so, from sales to project management to admin, whatever it is, like we've got these personality profiles that we're trying to match and find. And there may be some exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, that's the system that we use now. So between that, resume, experience now, like before, I didn't really care about experience. Like we can train you, we can do all that stuff. But now, if somebody coming into our organization, they need to come with batteries included. Like we can't go back and train you from the ground up to like catch up to speed to where we're at. Again, there may be some exceptions to that, but for the most part, like we need people who can come into our organization now who are able to provide value, that have a track record. And at the beginning stages of hiring people, you just don't need that, right? So yeah.
I love that. Batteries included.
Batteries
That's awesome.
included.
I'm going to borrow that. That's fascinating. I think, and I hear you on like the training people. I know at our organization at Renovo, like we typically, really gravitate more towards people that have quite a bit of experience, and, then it's just helping them understand the company and how everything works internally, but they kind of know the basic stuff. What we found is that you can have a couple of people that are projects, that have some intangibles that you could see value in over time. Where you get into trouble is when you have way too many projects, and I think that's what we found is like, we have a limited bandwidth, and we're now getting a lot larger, and our scale is allowing for certain things. Now we have we call it Renoversity. We have a whole training program that's very regimented and I think really, really good. And it's giving us the ability to train people and develop talent better and more consistently. But for the longest time, man, it was like, we got room for one, maybe two. And then after that, like, then we are not in a position to help them be successful, right? And then that doesn't really work.
The early stages too, it's super important to have people that are on board, that are fully in, that can contribute and aren't just like sucking the life out of you as a business owner. And that can be detrimental to your business. So yeah, it's the hiring process is an art and a science.
Yes, I was going to say it is definitely a combination of art and science, and we use some of the same, kind of personality analytics tools. We use some other ones that are a little bit probably not relevant for your business, but we always have used that as a complement to the qualitative aspect of the interview process, right? Because for us, culture is super important. Are there any things on those assessments that you found, regardless of position, that indicates that somebody would be a good culture fit for your organization?
No.
Really?
That's a hard thing to identify. And in addition to like experience and personality type, culture is probably like one of the most important things, because you could have somebody who's more than qualified. They check the boxes, but they're like not fun to be around, or they're kind of a drain. Like that right there is something that can put huge constraints on culture and growth. So I haven't found the culture test, right? I can say one of the subliminal things that I look for is if they've watched The Office and they've seen the majority of the episodes of that, like that gives me a good basis of like, will they fit in here or not?
So they get your jokes?
So they get our jokes, like that's kind of the era of where we settle around here. But no.
I love it. That's really funny. Yeah, culture is one of those things. It's so hard to put your finger on it sometimes. And it's such a delicate balance. And I think we've always taken the approach that I would rather take a lot more time to find the right person than fill a seat because there's some acute need, and then you get the wrong person, and that one person, right, can change the alchemy that you have within your entire team. I mean, and it's very easy to make that mistake. And so, we've kind of taken the approach of like, we hire slow, and then, you've got to put in the work to get the people to where they need to be effective. But if it's not working, you got to move quickly. But culture is one of the biggest aspects. And I'll tell you from our perspective, and maybe this will be helpful for you, but like, we found, I would say the number one, especially from the assessments that we use, the number one sort of category that we find is the most related to culture fit for us is accountability, right? People who own their results and people who don't make excuses, right? Because you get these people that are really smart, and you mentioned it a minute ago, right? When you're in the interview process, you get everybody's absolute best self. You get and if in the interview process you're like, it will never get better than that, right? They are absolutely putting everything they have into impressing you. And you get people that say all kinds of things, but we use a particular assessment that is very sales related, but one of the, a handful of the questions related to accountability. And it's like, well, if you missed your quota as a salesperson, like what would be the reason? And it gives multiple choice, right? Like my boss was a jerk, the market's bad. If they pick anything other than I could have done something differently, even if those other things are also true, right? The market is not always great. It's not always going to be at our back. That could be one of the reasons. But if you're always looking for the outside reason of why you didn't succeed, then you're never going to look inside. And that's the only thing you have control over. So like, yeah, the market was bad, but what could you have done differently to get a different outcome? There's always something. And the people that don't have that innate thing, you hear the excuses constantly. It's over and over. And I think every time, I would say almost every single time we've hired someone that didn't score well on that, they've almost always failed because they're never willing to admit or take ownership and therefore give themselves a chance to improve, right? They just never, they constantly run into the same problem over and over because they're not willing to admit that I could have done something differently. And they're always focused on external reasons. And
what's that test called?
So we call it the OMG because it's developed and run by a group called the Objective Management Group. I'm sure it has another name. I'm happy to share it with you, and I'll give it to you if you want to take it. It produces.
Fine. This guy's a psychopath.
It's like it takes a while. It's like a 45-minute test.
What? All right, no, I'm not doing that.
It produces about a 20-page report.
Wow,
it's very detailed. Now we don't pay close attention to some of those things. Like I don't read every page of that report. But what we did is, and we have a sales coach that we have on, she doesn't work for Renovo, but she's on retainer for our whole team to utilize. And so what we did was we asked Karen, shout out to Karen Miracle Sandler. We asked Karen to go back because I keep a record of every single person that we've interviewed and that has taken those assessments. And I have a spreadsheet where I put all of their results. And we had basically had Karen look at all the people that were on the team that were working really well and what characteristics from those assessments kind of lined up or were common. And then of the people that didn't make it, what are the characteristics that they had in common that were different from the ones that made it, right? So we sort of use that to figure out what are like the top 10 indicators of this is a fit versus this is not a fit. And we use both that assessment as well as either the predictive index or the DISC assessment for just general personality, kind of like profiles for certain roles and things. But that OMG is really important. And like the accountability, what are some of the other ones?
Does that test like narcissism versus something else?
it doesn't call it narcissism, but yeah, I mean, I think it tests a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of sales related things, right? Like closing ability and ability to get to decision makers, right? That isn't as important in our business, but there's a handful of things. But that's been really important for us because like I interview almost every single salesperson, like loan officer that we hire. I am an optimist. I love people and I will see the best in people. And so I started realizing that sometimes I root for these people because I like them, but then you really look at the numbers and it's like, this is not the right person. And so having that check against your own biases, right? And Daniel and Kevin, our two co-founders, partner with me on that process. And Daniel in particular is a lot more skeptical than me. So like the two of us also make a good pair because I'll sort of present the for case and he'll sort of present the this is why we shouldn't hire this person case. And then you look at the numbers and usually we come to the right answer. But that has been, I would say, one of the most important things, that the hiring process that we've developed through kind of trial and error, candidly, has yielded this culture of people that they care, they deeply care about what they do. They deeply care about the customer. They own their results. And, when you kind of put a bunch of people like that together, all of a sudden they start realizing it's okay to be me, right? And then they start policing the culture on their own. You get somebody in that doesn't fit and it's like, hey, this guy, I don't know about this one. And when they start doing that for you, you've kind of got something. Anyways, for us, it's been really, really important. And I think our culture is probably the thing I'm the most proud of all the things that we've, been able to accomplish, is having a group of people that really do love what they do. They show up every day and they work really hard to deliver for the customer, right? And anyway, that's been really cool. I know we've been at this for a minute, so let's try to start landing this plane. I would love to know. I always love to hear people's what was the biggest mistake, the biggest whether it was a failure or whatever. But what was the biggest mistake or challenge that you've had to endure? And what was the ultimate outcome? What did you learn from it? Did it improve your business over time or take you back? Does anything come to mind?
It was the end of 2022 when rates skyrocketed,
Yes.
right? So in 2022, I really started to get more active on social media, posting more about before and afters, the properties that I was doing. And I was doing flips and builds, and it was kind of like a 50-50 thing. And so I took on a bunch of rehabs, and I had a contractor that I was working with that he was good. I'd worked with him on a lot of deals, and he started to get more and more sloppy as things went on. And I started buying deals that were okay. They didn't pencil out as good as I wanted them to, but I'm like, I need to buy more to have content so that people see what I'm doing, so they think I'm cool, right? And there was a string of about 7 properties going into the Q1 of 2023 that I was over budget on the renovation. I was under what I expected to sell it for. The market had frozen because rates skyrocketed. And going into January, February of 2023, I lost $150,000 on collectively between all of those. And that was the worst, right? You want to talk about a setback, right? So that's one of those scenarios where my ego got in the way of making good decisions. Walking into a house and thinking, oh yeah, this is going to take, $40,000, and not going through the process and not, crossing my T's and dotting my I's. And so, and I can go back and I can probably look at every single major failure that I've had in business. There's been an ego decision that was the lead indicator of the lag indicator is I lose money or something happens, right? So yeah, your ego is the enemy, and it's not something that helps you in business. And it can help you in being able to grow and take territory and do things, but you have to definitely harness it.
Yeah. Well, that
with
speaks
systems.
That speaks to what we talked about earlier, right? It's that confidence that is required to be successful in this field, but then that butting up against the need to be humble, right? And those two things are kind of, a check on one another, and finding that balance is really hard to do. What was the ultimate outcome? Did you make any changes to your business? Did you structurally change things to prevent that from happening in the future?
Yeah. For one, that was the moment where we took a significant step back from doing rehabs, because I had all these houses on my balance sheet that were my monthly payments on those, losing money. But not only were we losing money on those, but each of those properties, there's a down payment associated with, there's a private lender that's associated with it sometimes. There's our own company cash that's tied up in this. And then I'm looking at that, and then I'm looking over here at all these builds that we're doing. I'm like, this is so much more predictable, consistent. I've never lost money on a new build. The same dollar amount that I'm spending over here, I could spend that on more of these over here and get a better result and not as many surprises. And so that was the big shift. The byproduct of that was lost a lot of money, and it was like, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. And so, it's this constant, I think I need to get checked into rehab for like flipping houses, because I'm like, in remission or in recovery. And then, something pops up and I'm like, oh, we should do it,
Yeah.
But ever since that moment, it's been, we haven't taken on any major remodels. It's all just been these like minor cosmetic paint, carpet type things. And that's been great for us. It's been a lot more predictable that way. So yeah, I mean, that forced us into doubling down on building and growing that side of our business, which has been, in the end, it's been a lot better outcome.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's a great example of accountability, right? You realize, okay, got a little excited on this. Now we take a really honest look at what is the decision-making process? How did we get here? And how can we avoid that? And that's now led to a lot of, sounds like a lot of your success. I know poker players always say that you don't remember the big wins, but you really remember the big losses. Are there any big either wins, or it sounds like this was long term was a big win, even though it came from, a mistake or what have you. But are there any like big wins? It's important to celebrate those, and it doesn't have to be financial, but things that like, catalysts to kind of help you get here. You've already mentioned a couple, but
yeah, I mean, there's always going to be those deals where you make good money on. They're the flashy, like the big wins, right? But at a certain point, like money comes in and money goes, and it like almost loses its value. Bills come in, bills get paid, like money just keeps passing through, right? And so I'd love to say like, yeah, we did this one deal, we made a couple $100,000 now. But I would say like the biggest win for me is finding people to join the team, and people who are passionate about what we're doing here. They enjoy showing up every day. And I think, but people who are
I saw a shaking head over there.
No. Yeah, finding like the huge win for me is finding people who are willing to go on this journey with me and deal with all of my goofiness, like
all your office jokes,
all my office jokes. Like that's a huge win for me. Like I've had some great, like we did a mobile home park that we flipped. Like that was a fun deal. The storage facility that I bought 2 years ago, that's probably been my absolute favorite. Buying something that is under half, 45% occupied, half of market rents. And then turning it now, we're at like 73% occupancy and, right at market rents, like this huge turnaround there. Like that's something that I've really enjoyed that deal. But hands down, like the biggest win for me is finding people to come alongside and do it with me.
That's awesome. Well, that sounds like as good a place to end as any. So I really appreciate you telling your story and being vulnerable with us today. And it's been really cool, learning more about it. You and I have known each other for 3 years or so now, but that was the first time I've really gotten kind of the whole thing all together. So really appreciate you sharing and taking the time. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again. Maybe we'll do it next year and we'll get an update.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.